For more on this, let's join environmental activist Nnimmo Bassey, who is live via Zoom from Port Harcourt. Good to have you join us.
Thank you so much.
So there are several disasters. We know that there are accidents, and they're just even building collapse are also disasters. But the climate change disaster seems to be imminent because of how many the disaster that it can pose to social and economic activities, as well as the loss of lives. And it is also now said that most of these other disasters are now being exacerbated by climate change. Talk to us about this.
Well, climate change is a real challenge to the world today because it affects everything. There's no sector of the economy, no sector of our life that is not impacted by global warming. And we've seen the kind of incidents that has happened in recent times. Look at the fires in the United States, in Greece, in Australia. Look at the floods in Nigeria, the floods in Europe. Some things that were not expected naturally in some areas are occurring. And from the recent report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the official scientific panel that helps to advise on these issues, we're seeing that more of these kind of incidents are going to occur in Africa. There's going to be more flooding. We're going to see more droughts. We're going to see heightened temperature increases. And the report also made clear that sea level rise is more or less irreversible. It's going to happen more. And this poses very serious threats, not just to Nigeria, but to Africa, the entire world.
And it poses more threats even to developing nations. And just this report we
absolutely.
saw. Just this report we saw recently from the UK, where it is termed adapt or die. Adaptation is a very key part when it comes to climate change. So talk to us about how you think countries, especially in this part of the world, Africa, are doing in terms of adapting to the disasters posed by climate change, especially after the 2011 tsunami and earthquake.
Yeah, and also the 2012 flood in Nigeria that killed over 300 Nigerians.
Absolutely.
Adaptation is something that actually it's quite offensive that those who did not cause the problem are now forced to adapt to living with the problem. And to avoid catastrophic climate change and to avoid situation where it's so difficult to adapt to the situation, we should be investing more in mitigation activities, which is what African countries unfortunately have to focus on. And this is where the countries need finance, this is where they need the expertise, and we need to pay attention to traditional means, which customary natural means of taking care of this kind of crisis. It requires a lot of planning, it requires a lot of investment, and this is also another reason why we need to, in our plannings across the continent, to include climate considerations in everything we do, in our food production, in infrastructure construction. And we cannot do too much to secure our people because our people are very vulnerable. We are losing land to desertification. We are losing land to sea level rise at the coastal region. And this is putting a lot of pressure on everyone, on Nigeria in particular and other vulnerable nations. So our countries need to, politicians in particular, need to look at the root causes of this problem. What is driving global warming and what needs to be done? We cannot say we must continue on the same pattern that raised the same pathways that created the problem just because we want to be like somebody else. Supposing the world, we have really cataclysmic global warming and nobody can survive it, what would taking the wrong path have achieved? This is a question that we need to ask ourselves.
And talking about what we're losing, you talked about we're losing lands and to desertification. We're also losing lives in Africa to insecurity, which is now being triggered by the fight over limited resources because of climate change. So what can Africa do in terms of charting its own path? Because it does seem like the rest of the world is going to leave Africa behind, and that's because of funding. We have limited carbon emission, but we seem to be bearing the brunt of carbon emission. What can we do? You talked about traditional methods earlier. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think the question you're asking really demands very deep thinking and responding, because if we look at on the surface, the global north, the distance between the global north and the global south will get wider if we are measuring the situation based on the current objective circumstances. But we need to look beyond that to look at the future. The future is such that the kind of climate events that we witness in the United States, for example, this year it has caused damage worth over $100 billion to that country. A lot of wildfires, hurricanes, and so on. At the end of the day, global north or global south, nobody's really ready to withstand the kind of cataclysmic climate changes that are coming. But what we can do, and this is where Africa has the upper hand, we can show the world simple ways of mitigating global warming. We've seen farmers in other countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger regenerating forests in the Sahel, using traditional knowledge, traditional technology. This should really, if this is bought by African governments and used in building the Great Green Wall, going from Djibouti in East Africa to Dakar in West Africa, and you're using indigenous trees, indigenous technologies, indigenous species to build that big belt, that would be a game changer in moderating climate impacts in Africa. Then secondly, we could also think again about agriculture. Agriculture is always blamed for carbon emissions in the atmosphere, but we don't ask the question, what kind of agriculture is causing this problem? It's industrial agriculture, depending on artificial fertilizers and all kinds of agrochemicals. But what of agroecology that really works with nature, that gives us healthy soil, and healthy soils are very good carbon sinks. And so we can have healthy food and a cooler planet through agriculture, by supporting our local farmers, through extension services and other supports. So there are things we can do. Rather than talking more and more about net zero, about carbon neutrality, we just brings in new techniques of arithmetics to solve climate change. This doesn't work. Net zero simply means you keep on with business as usual, keep on polluting, then carry out one activity or the other, or denote some certain factors as absorbing the equivalent of the carbon pollution that you are creating. This is mere speculation. It doesn't happen. It doesn't work. Nature doesn't work like that in real life.
And we hope they are listening, because we cannot afford to be left behind when it comes to issues of climate change. It's always great to have your insight on this issue. Thank you so much for talking to us. Environmental activist Nnimmo Bassey.
Thank you.